Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everybody to my Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Expert series. It's the fourth Tuesday of each month, but not December. I'm Dorian Mintzer, owner of Revolutionize Retirement and your host for the series. And I want to introduce Barbara Waxman, who lives just north of San Francisco in Marin County, which is a beautiful area. Barbara's the founder of the Odyssey Group. It's a highly sought-after longevity and leadership program. She is a highly sought-after longevity and leadership advocate, advisor, coach, speaker, and author. She translates cutting-edge research and collective wisdom in ways that enable individuals, groups, media outlets, and others to understand how the dynamics of our aging world impacts individuals, communities, companies, and the planet. Her leadership as a gerontologist in the coaching field has led her to develop a really transformative coaching model called Entrepreneurship Turned Inward, or ETI, and the evidence-based 7 lifestyle levers assessment and the longevity roadmap. And she'll be talking about these things today. She's an advisor to the Stanford Center on Longevity, Stanford Lifestyle Medicine, and is a faculty member at Chip Conley's Modern Elder Academy. She's author of 2 books examining aging, including the Middle Essence Manifesto, Igniting the Passion of Midlife, and How to Love Your Retirement. She recently authored a chapter on avoiding burnout for healthcare professionals in the book, The Successful Healthcare Professional's Guide. She holds a master's degree in gerontology and public administration from the University of Southern California, is a Colgate University graduate, and a Wexner Heritage Foundation Fellow. In addition, she earned her coaching certifications from the ICF, or the International Coach Federation, and the Hudson Institute. I am really delighted to have you with us today, Barbara. And I know it's early in the morning, and I appreciate your adjusting your time. I just learned that part of a time conflict was babysitting for a 1-year-old grandchild, which feels very delicious. Thank you for taking this hour off from that and being with us.
Happy to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Let's start with just tell us about yourself and how you got into this, because you're a gerontologist and a coach, and you've been in the field for a long time. So what kind of motivated you?
Sure.
What got you here? Let's start with that.
Well, it's a great beginning question, because nowadays when we're reading about the demographic changes, the silver tsunami, as people used to say some years ago, we've shifted from talking about aging to longevity. People will meet me and say, "You're so smart to be in this business." And I'll tell them I'm really not that smart, because I've been in the field of gerontology since before it was a field, or you could say it in this way, since the field of aging was in its infancy. So when I was growing up in New York, my father, who was a physician, would take me with him when he would volunteer at a certain nursing home, a Menorah Home and Hospital in Brooklyn, New York. I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and I would roam around while he was seeing patients, and I would look into rooms, and I'd peek around the corner, and people in this nursing home would say, "What's a girl like you doing in a place like this?" No one told me I wasn't that smart. No one told me, nor did I think of being scared or not want to go. Rather, I was intrigued by their faces looked different. They looked wise, and they made me feel wonderful, because everything I said they thought was fantastic. My journey began as a child, and as a result, through college, I worked in nursing homes as a recreational therapist. I thought I was going to be a nursing home administrator. Then after college, I worked in business and worked in management consulting, and recognized that there was a real need. Again, this whole area was in its infancy, but there was a need to bring together the understanding the entrepreneurial aspects of longevity with what I call the social worky side of understanding aging. And so I started to do consulting in the field. This was back in the 1980s, and did that for decades, really. And then around 2000, so a little over 20 years ago, people started asking me if I would coach them. I've been in California and had been in California at that time for maybe 15 years, and thought, but the New Yorker part of my brain thought, coaching, what's coaching? Another field, by the way, in its infancy. I think I've just been before my time. And I thought, that sounds really soft, coaching. Why do these people who are running companies ask if I would coach them? But I looked into it and I saw that coaching is a very powerful methodology that one can learn to enable people who are emotionally healthy enough, we all have baggage, to take where they are, use their past only for understanding today to create a plan moving forward. So I went back to school again. I'd already gotten 2 masters related to the field of gerontology. I went back to school and got my coaching credentials. So I became what I think is the first master's level gerontologist and coach in the country, and started Odyssey Group Coaching in 2005. So that's been my personal journey. And what's so helpful about that is that I have participated in every age and stage of the shifts in our country. So that gives me a certain perspective that I think is unique and that I can bring to the table. That's a little bit about my background, and thank you for sharing that long resume so people know what I'm doing with it today.
Great. It's so interesting. I feel like we're kindred spirits, which is such a lovely kind of feeling, because I started volunteering when I was about 10. You were a little younger than me, but I'm older than you now at this point. And I started volunteering with older people when I was 10. That got me interested in aging and when parallel stuff. So it's really great. And although I haven't gotten certified in a program in gerontology, I actually taught 7 years in a gerontology program.
Wow.
We come at it. It feels nice to feel like kindred spirits and being able to really see and celebrate what you've done. So tell us a little about what the Odyssey Group does, and then we'll keep going from there too.
Sure. Part of what I do, there are different lines of what I do as a coach. Even when I'm working with people running companies and I'm coaching them in leadership, I normalize aging to help people understand that our lives are not a trajectory that we grow up as long as our hormones are pointed in the right direction and they're increasing and we're getting taller and stronger. And then at 30, there's this idea that it's downhill. That is not the way we experience life. So what I do with all of my clients, whether I'm coaching them, whether I'm speaking, whether I'm advising companies, is to help people understand that those 30 years that we all read about now, the demographics, the extra 30 years, we automatically have this default thinking, okay, I'm going to be older longer. But that is not how we are experiencing those extra years. Those years are mostly packed into the middle of life. So midlife is actually a relatively new stage. And what I do with Odyssey Group with the coaching is help people understand how to activate themselves in what for many people feels like a second adolescence. What happens in midlife? Our hormones change, men and women. Bodies change, this time in ways that are not so awesome, maybe. It's more work to maintain. Our relationship shift. We're caregivers, right? We are entering new loving relationships. We have loss in our lives. We have changes with our physical bodies. All kinds of relationships. We have more transition in midlife than any other stage of life. And then we therefore have an identity shift saying, wait a minute, I'm not young, but I'm certainly not old. So I help people work with this and develop what we call at Modern Elder Academy, TQ, transitional intelligence. So I work as a coach and a speaker and a guide.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And it's so important. I totally agree that it's become more and clearer over the years that it's not that there's more time to be old, but more time to be vital and engaged in life in the middle. It's interesting. You in your Middlescence manifesto talk about 45 to 65. It feels like you've made it a little younger because about maybe a decade or so, or maybe more ago, people were saying middle age was 55 to 75. I would extend it. You say 45 to 65. If we're going to go down to 45, I'd say 45 to 75 or even some 80. Because some people, yes, it's amazing. I see in my coaching work, some people are so engaged and vital and dealing with the doing and being really through their 70s and into their 80s. And sometimes I have a few role models in their 90s that are still doing that. So you have to be careful not to make it too short.
I want to address that comment, and I am so glad that you brought that up. So I'll address it in a few ways. For one, there are some people, Chip Conley, who I work for at Modern Elder Academy, wrote a book called The Making of a Modern Elder. And he said midlife is 35 till about 65 or so, because he's really coming from the tech world, where by the time you're 35, you feel like you're already not the digital native that younger people are. The reason I chose 45 to 65 for Middlescence, first of all, is I needed to get my arms around creating the conversation. So let's just put that there. It is also, and I want your opinion on this, Dorian, so it's a great conversation, that it's also more of the reckoning time. What I find is that probably I should extend it to say about 70-ish. But what happens after 70, 72, it's not about being active. Middlescence and midlife is not about being active. It's continuing to struggle with the change. And what I have found, and I lead a number of groups, these salon groups, two of them right now. One's called the Nesters and one's called the Beautifuls. These women in their 70s and 80s, and I come in and facilitate conversations. And to be honest, I'm learning, I feel, more than I'm contributing to them. And what they're saying is by this stage, they're not struggling. They may have questions. They may need to resolve things, but they're at a stage of mastery, knowing what they want to learn, but they want to do what feels right and feels good instead of having that more challenging, friction-related ambition. So what do you think about that? You're in that stage, at that age, right? So are you more out of the struggle and know how to work through the nuance with more mastery, do you think?
It's an interesting question. I'm 77. In fact, next month I'm going to be 78, which I find the number is mind-boggling, but nonetheless. And I think it's both. I think because I still work and I have a husband who's 91 and really involved in kind of in this field and watching people age, I think it's a combination of still some struggles, but I know you talk about it in your book, and when I see it too, the U-shaped curve. I think many people do describe the 70s as the happiest decade. My sense of, since I have a lot of both coaching clients, but also friends and colleagues in their 70s and 80s, is that there still are some struggles, but I think there's a wisdom and a perspective that comes. So I think there's shifts in that way of making peace and some acceptance. But I think there's still, I know you and I agree that it's not really a midlife crisis, but there's this angst or a shift that happens. And I think it's still, for many people, it still can be into their 70s and even early 80s. Partly it depends on the choices one has made. And I do think there are parallels of the empty nest and retirement. But because we're living longer, as you've seen too, many people have shifted. It may be retiring from a full-time job, but certainly not, as you say too, retiring from life. And I love your term. You use preferment instead of retirement. So maybe talk a little about that, of how you've come up with that term.
So part of what I see my contribution as, and all of the work, what gets me out of bed in the morning is knowing in my small way, I want to help shift a national conversation, but on a micro scale, someone's lives by helping them have the language, because language is so important and words matter. So I try to, with adolescents, have people understand. And I hear from, it's heartwarming, so many people who say, adolescents, thank goodness you gave it a name. I felt like an adolescent, but I thought I was supposed to be a grown-up. I try to create language. So what happens with retirement is it's actually quite confusing for people. People think oftentimes, again, cultural default thinking, I'm working to save for my retirement. If we looked at what retirement from a chronological perspective was when it was created, we would be saying, I'll retire at 77. I'm going to work till 77 and then look at retirement. But no, that 65 number, which, as Dorian, was pulled out of the air, it was never really based on anything. In fact, it was beyond life expectancy, which was closer to 60 when Social Security was created. 65 has stuck. People think I want to work towards retirement. Then they're 65 and they say, wait a minute, but if my financial advisor tells me I might live to 90, because if I'm 65, if men are 65 today, they're likely to live to, I think, 87. And if women are 65, they're likely to live to 89. And by the way, if you're still a couple, it's interesting that factor of when you're living with a partner, one person in that couple is bound to live to 93. So at 65, if you have decades, people seem to be disappointed as though it's a surprise. Wait a minute, how am I going to have money to last that long? It's because much younger, we need to shift the conversation. And then they also get bummed out because they think, retire? They're going to I'm going to put myself out to pasture? What does it mean not to have my title? What does it mean to have a life of leisure? Leisure without meaning causes isolation and depression, which, by the way, has led to a massive increase in suicide amongst middle-aged white men in our country. It's an epidemic. The word retirement, I know it's a long answer, but it's important to understand the underpinning. Retire means to withdraw, and it made sense when someone had 10 or so years, if they made it that far, left. Let me take a trip, let me play some golf, and let me see my grandchildren. I have 10 years, I can make my money last, and that's it. People don't want that anymore, and they don't even want to give up work. What we all want is to say, what do I prefer? I want control. And even if I need to make money to make ends meet, I'm not willing to sacrifice in the way I did when I was in the, call it, proving stage of my life. Now I'm in the improving stage, and I want to do what I prefer. So how many people are greeters at Walmart who need extra income, who are in their 70s and 80s and finding meaning, purpose, and connection? So I call it preferment because what I invite people to do is, number one, make sure financially you have a plan so you know how much income you need to bring in. But number two, what is it you really prefer? And build a portfolio of the connections with yourself, by the way, and others that you prefer in this stage, and then have an annual sort of spiritual check-in with yourself to renew it, like a contract with yourself. So that's the idea of preferment.
I like that. And I really do agree with the idea of life portfolio and just a money portfolio. You have to reevaluate it. And it's not written in stone, and you need to reassess, both spiritually, financially, health-wise, to figure out what's next. But I think that's a nice term, preferment. What do you prefer?
And in terms of the portfolio idea being like an investment portfolio, the other reason, and once again, Dorian, you're hitting the nail on the head without maybe even realizing it, is all of these things require an investment in someone's time and focus and energy. People have an underlying assumption life should just flow, and I should know at this stage what it is I want. That's inaccurate. Just because we're, quote, grown-ups on paper doesn't mean the answers are right in front of us. It requires examination. It requires growth. And as we know from when we think about adolescence, growth is hard. It's wonderful, but it causes discomfort. So I also say to people, all right, let's go in your discomfort zone. What would it look like? You're not committed to it, but let's throw out ideas that are dreams. Then we can work backwards. You can tear up that piece of paper. Why not start with dreams and then see what nuggets are possible and invest in them, even if it takes time?
I totally agree. And that's why I think, although you say with your nesters and the beautiful group that there's less struggle, I think people still are, I think with energy and time, and I know you talk about that in your book too, and I totally agree with you. I think that there is this wish to maximize, and it's not necessarily doing, but just they're still wanting to figure out that inner work of Connie Zweig's work about the shifting from role to soul. So I think there's still, so I still do think that there's some struggles into the 70s and 80s to do the kind of work you're talking about. I really do, because I think it's so important.
Yeah.
So say more about the way you work. You have a couple of things that I think could be helpful for people to know about. The ETI, the entrepreneurship turned inward, and your thriving quiz. Maybe talk about that. And I just wrote the thriving quiz this morning, so I wanted to have a little better understanding of it. But talk a little about that, because I think it's part of how the ways to help people think about self-care, but also dreams in a way.
Sure. So first I'll talk about entrepreneurship turned inward, ETI. That is the name of my coaching model. So when I became a coach, and I mentioned the New Yorker part of my brain thought this is really soft, and a lot of the people I work with have been on the outside and for a large part of their lives on the inside, very successful in life, and have felt, though, that they're an imposter. They feel like everyone thinks I'm successful, but something just doesn't feel right anymore. So they're primed for coaching, right? They need a strategic thought partner to help them understand how to excavate the wisdom that's within that we don't take the time in our busy lives to find, and to activate it and explore and build their capacity to do more differently and create their lives. In our country, in the United States, and I work internationally, but this was really created for this idea of the U.S., an entrepreneur is someone sexy, right? You want to invest your time, your money, your social connections, your energy in some cool, new endeavor. And I turned that on its head, and I said, what if we look at our lives, at ourselves, almost like a product, right? With as much intention and investment as we do as, quote, a business case. So that's why it's called entrepreneurship turned inward, taking care of the business of your life. And here are the pretty consistent steps, all built based on adult development learning. Now, it can work with younger people, but in a different way. So I'd say people who are 40 and what I call better, once again, reference to a nod to the U-curve of happiness. We do get happier over the decades, so midlife and better. The first step I take is to help people discover their best selves. And we do that by, in one session, I am not a therapist, spends a lot of time, and it's very important, excavating someone's lives to find out what's not working and to fix it. What I do as a coach is, in one session, have someone tell me the threads of their story, the threads of their life, so they can hear themselves. We can look at the downtimes, the peaks, and understand, oftentimes, in fact, what people see is their greatest growth and their greatest trajectory comes from those really down times. So we discover and catch up themselves and unearth some wisdom. And then we look at building their capacity, and I'll get back to that when I talk about the 7 lifestyle levers.
Mm-hmm.
Then we move to defining their drivers. Some people call it values, but values it's an overused term because then someone says, okay, I'll list my values. Everything I do is put to work. What is going to help you make a decision? I'll give you an example. For me, a driver for 2024 is a theme in a way. One of my key driver is say yes to joy. I'm needing to really discern and remove some things to make way for being Nana, a grandma, because I have 2 grandbabies and my kids, I work a lot. I love my work. I travel. It's very exciting. I'm teaching an upcoming workshop in Baja, and we have 2 spots left, by the way. Go to my website if you want to learn more. So I do all these things, but I need to do less of them. So my driver for the year is say yes to joy. If it doesn't bring me joy, I'm not going to do it. I'm still going to do the laundry and I'm still going to pay my bill. But in broad strokes, when I work with people, the reason they get results is we make it what is going to help them have a decision-making tool so they don't need a coach forever. They can work within themselves. Then we start to engage with intention and build a plan and be open to growth. So that's ETI. So before I go on to 7 lifestyle levers, anything else you want me to expand upon in coaching or ETI?
Well, I think you gave a nice description of that. And so Susan from Annapolis was referring, it's maybe a little before the ETI, but I think it relates to what you were just saying. She just says comfort with struggle. And I think what she was meaning is that maybe that's part of what that happens. And maybe it's part of the U-shaped curve too. It's not that there's not struggle, but somehow there's a resilience or a sense that we've been there before. Even the studies, I'm just thinking of some of the studies that like Ken Dykewald during the pandemic had done with Edward Jones, I think it was.
Yes,
and they said that older people actually did better with the pandemic than younger people because there was a sense that we've dealt with the vicissitudes of life and the ups and downs and the disappointments and stuff. And somehow it's not like we like what's going on, but it's not going to be forever. Although the way COVID's going, maybe it will be forever. But I don't mean that a little tongue in cheek. But go ahead. Yeah.
But I agree that this idea of comfort with struggle is making friends with the reality that change is a constant. And I think the older we get, the more we have a deep kind of understanding that's the way it is. And as a culture, there's a lot of ageism. And once we reach the stage and age of midlife and better, we know that. But even though we know that, people in control in culture, in advertising, in media, still portray people midlife and better as less able to cope, right? And that's absolutely untrue. And you hit the nail on the head. COVID was a true indicator of the resilience built in the fortitude we gain when we've experienced this many years on the planet.
Right.
Great point.
I think it's really important. And I think just back to the language, and Meg from Cambridge has commented too that language is so important. And I think it is important to think about how we're defining things and calling things. That's why I like your preferment. But also this internalized ageism is such a hard, I think you call it something else. I'm trying to remember what term you had, but I tend to we internalize the myths and begin to think that it's all downhill when it's not, or doesn't have to be.
I'll offer another term. So we've got midolescence, which is like a second adolescence, but with wisdom. We have preferment, which is more aspirational than retirement. And the other one I will add, and I think this is an appropriate place in our conversation, is to become age-agnostic. So I have friends who are younger than me. I have friends who are older than me. And sometimes in a conversation, I wouldn't know which is which. if I didn't attach to the number assigned to their age. I think that we no longer can be defined. It used to be when we lived life in 3 stages. When you're young, you learn. In the middle, you earn and have a family. And towards the end, you retire, withdraw, and have leisure because you're not really good for anything else. That is the old way that we looked at it. And it was by age. And that's why 65 has been cemented, and we must change that for the health and wellness of our country and in fact, our planet, because it's an international phenomenon. When you're age agnostic, you're saying, let me look at this individual and see, what are they about? Who are they? What do they stand for? And how can I either choose to interact or not with them? Taking away the stigma associated with a number works wonders, which is why I say with the nesters and the beautifuls, people said to me, oh, that's so nice that you're going in and you're talking to this group of what, right? Oh, poor dears. Are you kidding me? They're doing amazing things. And I'm learning from them every day because they are wise ones. And there are younger people who are wise ones as well.
Right.
So that's being age agnostic. And I think if people would try it on for size, they might see that it's freeing in a way.
No, I think it's true. And I think there is such a push of kind of intergenerational, and there's so much to learn from people of all ages. And it's right. We live in a nonlinear life. It isn't, as you were saying, it's not just 1, 2, 3 stages, which I think people have been talking about for a while. And I became a mom at 50. That was to never be able to be saying it's my encore career, becoming a parent. But there's no right time, right way. And I think, it is important to recognize that wisdom will come at all different ages, but there is something about the wisdom and perspective, I think, that can come if we allow it to learn from our years. That I think being older doesn't necessarily mean you're wise, but there are ways of, as you say too, of the reflecting and thinking and integrating things and then figuring out how you want to interface with the world. It's so important throughout life.
Absolutely.
I think I'm agreeing with you a lot there. Ellen, I'm trying to integrate a little because I know I want to be respectful of needing to end as close to the top of the hour as we can. Ellen from New York says, how do you balance building a positive aspirational view of aging with the physical challenges of aging?
Yes. Okay. Let me share some personal information because a lot of time, and you can't see me, but I'll show up and I am strong and healthy, and I am, and I have 2 fake hips, and I have an autoimmune disease, and I've got some arthritis. So I speak from a place of knowledge. I'll just say that. So how do we remain aspirational? Part of it, and we will get back to this after I respond perhaps, is understanding what I have come to not learn, it is to know at a very deep level. Our lifestyle is medicine. Every choice we make, from the moment we open our eyes in bed, before I get out of bed, I think of 3 things. I take a deep breath and really fill my lungs and think of 3 things. It may take 1 minute, this entire exercise, and it gets me before I'm out of bed, frames my day. 3 things I'm grateful for. It's a huge breath. Breathe out. 3 things I'm grateful for. And it can be, today there's not rain and it's been raining. It could be mundane and it could be very personal. It could be I had a wonderful dinner last night. It could be, and this is for me, many mornings it's, wow, I'm doing a body scan and I don't feel pain anywhere in my body. Mindset is foundational. Every choice I could go on during your day and making sure you're activating your mind, your heart, and your gut, and then spending the time necessary to connect your gut, your heart, and your mind that is the recipe to embrace your life, even with physical decline, because that's part of it. There's no, and this is maybe the New Yorker in me, there's no free lunch. When I was at a Pilates class yesterday and we were doing things and there were people of all ages and I was doing this thing with a split, and then something came up and I said something about with two prosthetic hips. People were like, what? I said, if we have the technology and we put it to work, the way I like to think of it is I have one hip that's 9 years old and another hip that's 18 months old. Can you say that? I said to about a 25-year-old. Oh, cracked up. I don't know if that is a good enough answer, but we have to use what we've got. That's our only choice.
Yeah, that's true. This is a comment. Susan, again from Annapolis, says, we are TAB. She says, temporarily able-bodied. And she says, I have
That's
two
right.
bionic hips, too. So, but let's shift back to the 7-year evidence-based 7 lifestyle levers assessment, which I do want to point out to people that if you go to the event page, there's a link to be able to take that. But can you tell us a little about your emphasis on these lifestyle things? And
yeah, absolutely.
Go with that. Great.
And everything else in my life, and I share this because if you look at your life, whoever you are listening, there are nuggets there. Make sure you learn from them. And typically they come from pain, the best nuggets. I'll start this answer to the 7 lifestyle levers assessment at my daughter's 8th birthday party when Jill was 8. And spoiler alert, so you don't worry, she's 31. She has a baby, not the one I'm babysitting for today. She's healthy. She has her whole body. But when she was 8 years old, she wanted to leave her own birthday party. And if you've ever been 8 years old and can remember that or had a child, for an 8-year-old to want to leave their birthday party as a parent, something is seriously wrong. And she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. Long story short there, that put me on a path to have to learn everything about what we call integrative medicine, because traditional medicine wanted to take out her colon part at 9 years old. By the time I got to that, we did not do that. And suffice it to say, she's healthy, and I've gathered and learned all about integrative medicine. Then I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is a low thyroid condition, and recognized that there are so many things we could do to cultivate, and cultivation is an important word because it's not a one and done. We have to continually cultivate our energy and our health. All of that put me on a path of research and learning about exuberant health, wellness, and energy. And so over the years, I used something called the 5 to Thrive quiz. But in the past few years, and especially since COVID, once again, there's that COVID thing, I've been doing more research because there is so much burnout, especially in the healthcare field. And I was asked to write a chapter on burnout in a book for healthcare students, doctors, nurses, etc., so that they could avoid burnout in their careers, because it's still at epidemic level. So we upped the game and increased the research, and I recognized that lifestyle, as I said before, is medicine. Did more research, and in fact, Stanford University, they have a division of lifestyle medicine, is going to use this assessment on their website. So it is fully researched, and there are 7 areas for you to attend to in your life. Investment, yes, because it takes a lot of time. The first, I'll just call them out, is movement. I will call the first 2, movement and nourishment, as the tip of the iceberg, because it's what most people think. Oh, I'm starting the new year. I'm going to walk more. I'm going to eat well. Those are important, but just as important are the other 5 that I'll mention. But let me talk a little bit about movement. It is not just how many hours a day you're moving, but it's also strength training. As we get older, we lose muscle mass. And so if we want to be 90, 95 and carry our own groceries, when we're 70, we need to carry 2 bags of groceries if we'll want to carry one. We need to look ahead and say, what do I want to be doing at 95? And then in a sense, be training for that at whatever age you're at, if that makes sense. Strength training is hugely important. Activity level, take the stairs.
Right.
Be mindful of your lifestyle all the time. Movement, and this highlights ways to do that. Nourishment, I call it nourishment and not just nutrition, because there are a few things that happen to all of us. One, we can eat the right things and then we're not satisfied, and that's when we, quote, cheat. We have to look at what nourishes us. For me, when someone says be on a ketogenic diet, don't eat carbs, the way I'm set up, that's a recipe for failure, because I need to feel satisfied. To feel nourished, I need to eat carbs. That's just me. Nourishment is very important. The third area is renewal, and it's understanding, yes, minimum 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and what does your sleep hygiene look like, but also we don't all sleep so well. What does renewal look like to you? I'm a big believer in power naps. Works for me. For my husband, he said, if I do that, I'm more exhausted. It doesn't work. Renewal for him is a sauna. That would exhaust me. What does renewal look like? That's the third area. The fourth area is, relationships. Social isolation is another health risk factor that doctors more and more are asking about in people's life. So things like, do I feel like I'm contributing and supporting others? There was a study done, people living in a nursing home, and they were given the assignment, this was in Michigan years ago, of calling people who were still living independently in the neighborhood, basically a once a day morning call to check on them. And those people who were the, quote, poor dears in the nursing home gained so much agency and a sense of control over their lives by volunteering to call someone else. So anyone, regardless of your physical condition, can be a contribution. And I think a lot of people take that for granted. So what are the relationships? And by the way, saying no to relationships that no longer serve is super important. The next area has to do with cognition, which is one of the top fears, has to do with dementia. So understanding how to work with, not against, the mind that you have, even things like limiting negative thoughts, help frees up space for your memory to stick more. So we ask questions about that. Having a sense of purpose in your life. And I want to say for a moment that as a culture, we get stuck on purpose. Things, and these are colleagues of mine in the field, but things like the meaning of life is a life of purpose makes so many people feel like a failure. What if I'm not doing something like Mother Teresa? I'm not good enough. I'm not doing enough for purpose. Let's just break it down. First, there's 2 kinds of purpose, and both of them shift over the course of your life. So Dorian, when you became a mom at 50, I'm sure your sense of purpose changed at 50 in a way you may have not imagined 10 or 15 years before that. When I was starting my business and my daughter became ill, my sense of purpose changed on a dime. Why? Because I was called to find a cure for her. There's little p purpose when we're not sure. What are those things that bring you joy? It makes you a better person for yourself and in the world. And if you follow those breadcrumbs of just doing things that matter to you and being kind to others, it will bring you toward a larger purpose. This year, I have a number of clients who are saying, I'm committing to the election, to doing something to get out the vote or to the planet. Don't get stuck on purpose. No, there's big P and little p. If you do those areas, if you pay attention and invest in those, the final 7th lever that you can pull for your lifestyle has to do with stress management. But that kind of happens automatically when you do, so it's a freebie if you invest in the former 6. So that's an overview. of how this assessment works. And it's like an old school Cosmo quiz. You score yourself. It's fun to take. Takes about 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, as I said, I did it this morning before the interview because I wanted to have a sense of it. I do recommend that people try. And as I said, there's a link for it on the event page so that you can look at that. So speak a little too about the way you think about it's not just time management, but energy management, because I like that and I agree with you. And as I said, I feel like your work and mine I think we're kindred spirits in this, and we've been at it a long time. We really are. So talk a little, if you would, about energy management in terms of time.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'll ask people who are listening to think about something that may have come up in their lives recently that's been very challenging. Maybe a conversation that they needed to have with a family member or a friend, or even a work assignment. And I'll venture a guess that you'll start your day and you'll think, okay, let me take care of the low-hanging fruit, right? I'm going to check my emails. I'm going to respond to a few things. And then when I clear the decks and I feel like open, I'm going to deal with that, right? Dorian, have you ever had that kind of experience? You want to get yourself ready for what that tough thing is?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a way sometimes to avoid the tough thing and not necessarily. Sometimes it is preparation.
What happens from an energy perspective, you're absolutely right. From an energy perspective, think about when is your energy the best? For most of us, it's in the morning, sometime in the morning. Maybe not when we first get up. Maybe we need an hour or so, but it's usually in the morning. The caveat I will make is when I work with artists and creatives, it's so fascinating that oftentimes they say, oh no, my best thinking is at night. So at night, even when my kids were growing up, I'd say to them after 8 o'clock, I'd say, I'm off duty. Like this is not my best time. I'm going dark for the rest of the night. So think about doing the toughest thing you need to accomplish when your energy is the best. And for most of us, that means ending the night before, saying, what's my plan for tomorrow for this tough conversation? And then doing it first. So match what you want to accomplish. And maybe it's something that you're struggling with physically. I physically need to do my physical therapy. It's uncomfortable. I feel like it's not helping. I feel down about it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to commit to it, and I'm going to do it when my energy is the best, so I have the best chance for success. We are energetic beings. We are actually animals who react to sunlight. One of the questions in the 7 Lifestyle Levers assessment, and it's research-based, is are you getting at least 15 minutes of sun? I say anytime, but the truth is it's supposed to be in the morning sometime. Go outside and actually get the rays of sun. The sun for 15 minutes is not going to kill you in terms of the rays. We need to get that into our bodies, and it makes us feel better. So understand how your energy works. This assessment will help you start. And as we said, we're offering for whomever Dorian chooses, we're offering, if you take the assessment, I'll spend 20 minutes. We'll find a time and we can talk about that or whatever you'd like to talk about. But understanding how your energy works, which is different from anyone else's and changes according to the season, changes according to your physical being, your spiritual being. Understand your energy and work with, not against it.
Wonderful advice. Tell us a little bit more about how you've been speaking about it, but just your sense of this longevity roadmap that you talk about also in your book.
I'm very excited about it. I'm actually, in addition to this year, my theme being Say Yes to Joy, and I welcome others to join me. It is also consider myself an experiment of one. And what I mean by that is this is my year in creating the roadmap to do all kinds of things experimenting with the latest and greatest in this longevity sphere. And I will be teaching in a year. It'll be the first quarter. We don't have a date yet. If you want to go sign up for my once a month newsletter on my website or stay up to date with what I'm doing, I'll be teaching it either in Santa Fe or in Baja for the Modern Elder Academy early 2025. What I'll be doing is helping people understand what is the latest research, how to understand the foundation of where they are today, look at where they want to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or even just stay with how I want to be today, and create your own roadmap to build your personal plan over time so that you can match what we call your health span, which is not just physical health. It's all of these areas. It's physical, mental, spiritual, relational health with the length of life. Because what's happening is people are living longer, as we've said. Maybe 20 of those years are now added in the middle, and we are very active. But for so many people, up to the last 10 years are in real decline because they've not had the benefit of the knowledge and the perhaps coaching to create a longevity roadmap that's very specific in matching their health span to their lifespan. If that makes sense.
Yep. So why don't you tell people your website, and that would be probably helpful for people to know how to sign up for your newsletter and to be able to follow things that you're doing.
My website is my name, BarbaraWaxman.com, BaraWaxman.com. And you could find most everything on my website.
Great. So let me just be able to say, since it's almost the top of the hour, there was one other comment that Meg had. I don't want to open up a whole, but I just a comment that maybe you can comment on, and we'll be pulling things together. But she said she loves age-agnostic for ourselves and society. And then she says, but yet she's an octogenarian now. And she says, I do think that the 80s have a different and often increasing challenges, but also the benefits of true elderhood, encompassing wisdom, perspective, and the spiritual development. So she wanted to comment on that part. So I just wondered if you had any thought.
I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think that's an excellent point. By being age agnostic, I'm not saying don't be proud of your age and own the wisdom that you have. I regularly say to people, I'm 61. I don't have a problem with numbers as long as they don't hold us back and they're used for good. So I applaud you for recognizing the power and potential of being an octogenarian and sharing that, because I'm sure you're an inspiration to others. So that part of representing is super important. It's not a secret. My age, as long as people are comfortable, age is not a secret. It just shouldn't be the qualifier that defines us.
And you do a lot of talking about age versus stage. Maybe you can just comment on that too.
Yes. Once again, Dory, you're a perfect example. If people said, oh, what were you doing at 50? You would say, it's not so much about what you'd think at 50. The stage I'm in is being a mom. The stage I'm in is being a traveler, a career woman, a grandmother, a mother. So I think more about what stage am I in than being tied down to a number. And that's what I would encourage each one of you to do. What stage are you, or do you want to be in?
I think that's so important. I know all the time when my son was growing up, I was saying, I'm dealing with second stage life kind of things, although I'm in my third stage of life at that point. And to think that it's just not linear. So final kind of point or question I want to ask, and it may be a good takeaway, is that you often say, and I think it's inspiring, that you say, become your best self for the longest time possible and for what matters most. Can you just comment on that? And because I do think maybe it's a good ending point for today's conversation.
Sure. Everything we've talked about is about being our best selves. And we are our best selves when we are healthy, when we are whole, when we don't hold ourselves back by thinking we're too this or too that, too old, too disabled, when we don't allow others to hold us back, when we understand that no matter where we sit, whether it's in, as I mentioned, that study of people who had been in a nursing home, we can be a contribution, and that not only enriches other people's lives, but our own. So when we take all these factors that we've been discussing, we can be our best version of ourselves for the longest time possible. And all the work I do is help people understand, what does it mean to be my best self? Because my best self, as much as Dory and I might have in common, we also, if we really excavated and understood, probably have very different ways that we wanted to show up in our lives. That's what I mean by that statement. It takes a lot of self-reflection, but in an active way.
Great. I think that's really helpful. Any final kind of comment you want to make before we say goodbye for today?
I want to thank you for having me as a guest. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. And I would encourage any of you who can make it. As I said, I have 2 spots left in this workshop, which is really an invaluable experience. And also, I want to encourage each one of you to be an ambassador in the world for people who are midlife and better, because it's inspiring to others when we do show up as our best self. That's all. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here today, and enjoy your afternoon with being a babysitter for your grandchild. But thank you for taking the time to share your perspective and wisdom with all of us. Thanks. Take care.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.